Waiting room. Matt, félicitations, man.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami.
Kids are the best.
They really are.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a formal congratulations to Matt for he and his wife are expecting, but also for that great shanty song you did. I heard it on City News just yesterday. It sounded really great. So if this politics thing doesn't work out, there's a great gig ahead in East Coast music. Congratulations. And welcome to everyone. Just a few reminders, which is our standard procedure for these Zoom calls. Please stay on mute at all times unless you're called upon to speak. Members of council, if you wish to speak to any item, please use the raise hand feature located at the bottom of the participants list in Zoom, and *9 for members on the phone. The meeting will be live streamed on YouTube. Members and staff are asked to position their cameras so their faces are centered and as close to the top of the frame as possible. And phone-in participants, please do not put the phone on hold. So before we proceed, I do a quick roll call of all members. Conseiller Cloutier.
Présent, Monsieur le Maire.
Councillor Derouz.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Elshantiri.
Answer.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Hubley. Councillor Hubley. Councillor Luloff.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Sons. I saw Jenna. Councillor Sons, is your mic on?
Here.
There we go. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Vice Chair Dudas.
I'm here.
Great. So we'll go through the consent agenda and any declaration of interest. Est-ce qu'il y a des déclarations de l'intérêt? Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbaux for the 1st of December, le 1er décembre 2020.
Carried.
Carried.
We have an additional item. We have to waive the rules to allow it to go onto the agenda by our colleague, Councillor Moffat, consideration of proposed Whitewood Avenue servicing on suspension. Carried.
Carried.
Councillor, do you want to deal with this now? I think it's pretty technical in nature and supported by staff.
Yep, it's going to take me some time to read the motion, but I can do it now. Just bear with me here. So this has to do with a bit of a historical contamination issue in Manotick that's kind of evolved into another parts of the village, and we're just been working on this for over the past year and more with some of the affected residents, and this is just the solution to get service to them to solve this groundwater contamination issue. So whereas as part of the city's groundwater management strategy, a study was completed in the village of Manotick, and untreated water collected from private wells was analyzed for bacteria and a suite of chemical parameters. And whereas volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, were found to be present in 5 private residential wells on Whitewood Avenue, one of which had a concentration exceeding a safe drinking water limit. And in addition to the VOC contamination, private residential wells on Whitewood also showed very high chloride concentrations of an unknown source, rendering the water non-viable for domestic use. And whereas although the source of the detected VOCs cannot be determined with certainty, the evidence indicates that it is associated with the dumping of tetrachloroethylene in the early 70s, 80s, PCE, noting that the groundwater contamination from this source led to the provision of drinking water servicing for the core of the village of Manotick in 1993, funded by the province. And whereas the party attributed to the historical VOC contamination in Manotick is no longer present and cannot be pursued to provide financial assistance and remediation to the affected residents, whereas the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks indicated there is currently no provincial funding program for emergency servicing, and therefore they are not able to provide financial assistance to the affected residents to resolve this historic issue. And whereas staff have prepared a scope of work that will provide the affected residents with a safe water supply and considered a number of financing options, including a local improvement charge, which is not recommended at this time, primarily due to the length of time required to complete the process. Staff has prepared 2 cost estimate options based on the project scope and on the approach taken by the province in 1993 as follows. Option 1, domestic water supply only, consisting of 260 meters of 100 millimeter diameter water main from Dr. Leach Drive. The Class D total capital cost estimate for this option is approximately $1.23 million, including services to within 1 meter of each building face. To be consistent with the approach taken by the province in 1993, this option would be fully funded by the city. Option 2 would be a domestic water supply, so same as the above, except this one would be partially funded by the residents, as it would include fire hydrants. So whereas option 2 is consistent with council's ultimate servicing strategy for Manotick, which envisions an extension of services, including fire protection for existing and future development within the village, and whereas option 1 would see no immediate cost to the residents, but lacks fire protection, whereas staff propose that homeowner costs in option 2 would be approximately $7,900 per resident if divided among the 9 residents based on the difference between option 1 and 2 construction cost estimates, i.e. $71,000 for a net city cost of $1.319 million. And whereas the councillor, myself, has indicated his wish to undertake consultation with the affected residents regarding option 2, with the recommendation that design of the project proceed in parallel with these consultations to ensure that safe drinking water infrastructure can be provided to these homes as soon as possible. And staff concur with this approach. Therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Economic Development Committee recommend council approve a plan for remediation for the affected Whitewood Avenue properties, as described in this motion, as follows: that option 2, domestic water supply and fire protection, consisting of 260 meters of 200 millimeter diameter water main from Dr. Leach, including fire hydrants, be conditionally approved, as is consistent with the city's ultimate servicing strategy for Manotick, with $1.39 million of budget authority established, with $1.319 million to be funded from the city's water rate reserve and $71,000 to be funded through cost recoveries from residents. And that if the consultation process with residents cannot be resolved prior to the completion of the design process of option 2, staff will proceed with option 1, with the establishment of $1.23 million of budget authority funded from the city's water rate reserve. So this is the intent is hopefully that we can get this job up and running and done within the next within the calendar year of 2021. But we do need time to establish that support on that fire protection aspect, as we are asking residents to come up with a bit of money on that front.
Okay, and staff are supportive, and I believe have helped you, Councillor, with this issue. And
Yeah, Christopher Rogers and Michelle Kearney have worked closely on this, and we've worked with Jen Nielsen as well in recent weeks and months on getting us to this point, and moving on from here, it'll go to design and construction.
Okay, so we've got a couple hands up. I was going to do consent. Are they brief questions, Councillor El-Shantiri and Leeper? Or do you want a more substantive discussion? We'll come back.
Just a
Brief question.
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor, if I may, just to the council, because I'm not familiar with the area, but isn't the fire protection is available in Manotick, or still a rural service fire in that area?
So the areas where there are water services that were brought in 1993, there is fire protection. So we would tap into a water main that's already existing on Dr. Leach. Whitewood hits Dr. Leach right behind the Manotick Arena near the tennis club, and we'd come up Whitewood a little ways with either the 100 millimeter pipe in option 1, or the in option 1, or the 200 millimeter pipe, based on the support from the residents.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper.
I don't know if staff want to come back to answer it, but just the implications with respect to what that does to our water rate reserve, and what might not be able to get done as a result.
Is that Mr. Moody?
No, I think Jen Nielsen would likely take that, or Steve Willis.
Or Steve?
Hi, through the chair. So this is not coming out of existing renewal budgets. It's coming out of the water rate reserve. So I don't anticipate that it would have any impact on our regular renewal program. In terms of the impact to the reserve, I see Ms. Stephenson has her camera on, so I'll pass it to her to speak to the impact on the overall reserve.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jen. Councillor, to your question, there are sufficient funds within the reserve. Our continuity schedule at this point in time to the end of 2021 forecasts a balance of $115 million. So I'm comfortable moving ahead with this.
Thanks, Chair. That's all.
Thank you. We did, just to be, we did try to find other options. The reserve was the last option for us. We tried to find other funding mechanisms. But in the end, the only one that we could come up with to get this done right now was the reserve.
Okay, so on the motion by Councillor Moffat, Carried.
There's a question from
Okay.
Councillor Meehan. Oh.
Councillor Meehan, so we just passed it. Are you on to another item now?
No, I just wanted to know the total cost of the reserve. I know what the residents are being asked to foot, but I must have missed the total
Yeah.
cost.
So 1.3.
That's the cost of this, and Ms. Stephenson just said it was $150 million.
150 million to remediate those
No,
nine.
$150 million in the reserve. 1.3 million to do this project.
Good, thanks very much. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was carried.
Thank you.
Next is Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Services, Planification, l'Infrastructure et Développement économique. CARP Airport, we have a presentation and at least 6 or 7 delegations to speak, so we'll come back to that. Next is under Economic Development and Long Range Planning, South Maryvale Business Park that FEDCO approved the city convey to Zena Kinder Holdings Limited, the lands described in document 1 subject to the terms set forth in document for consideration of $1. I think this is an issue that goes back many, many years, and there's now no longer a desire for the road, so we're handing the road back to the private property owner in the business park. And I think Councillor Harder has, sorry, if we have a substantive discussion, we'll come back to it. Is it a quick?
No.
You want more discussion?
No, I just think that as the only person here for sure that knows the history on this, this is a very good deal.
Yeah.
And if anyone has any further questions, I certainly could contribute my recollections of it. In fact, Nepean had money set aside, and I think Eli might have been here in 2004. It was a very difficult year for us at the newly amalgamated city, and we actually took that money that was set aside for the roads there, and it disappeared. Yeah. So it's a good deal.
Okay. So on the motion, carried. Next is Planning Services, Service de la Planification, Brownfield Grant Application 2583-2599 Carling Avenue. Carried.
Carried.
And then we've got Councillor Dudas's motion, so we'll come back to that. So the first item on the agenda is back to the CARP Airport. And we have a presentation by Peter Radke.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that went by really quickly, but I just wanted to note that in terms of the brownfield application that I'd like to put in a staff inquiry in regards to it for future brownfield applications.
Okay, well, we've passed the report. Do you want to subsequently do something for future brownfield?
Correct, that's right. Okay, so I just wanted to address the fact that we're having a grant for a brownfield application that is a special deal when it's near transit, but this has nothing to do with transit-oriented development. And we're still passing it. Obviously, it's passed, but I think we need to have stronger criteria in the future.
Okay, so what you might want to do is bring that up at council, because you're not a member of FEDCO, unless you want to get a member of FEDCO to move it. It'll go to council next week.
Okay. Well, if someone can move it for me, I have one written up that I did with with Don.
Why don't you circulate that to members of the committee, and then we'll come back to it.
Sure.
Who wants to, and
all right.
email you directly if they want to move it.
Okay. Thank you.
So under Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development, CARP Airport, amendments to the terms and conditions of the 2011 agreement. It oppose CARP modification de clauses et conditions des ententes de 2011. So we have Peter Radke, Manager of Realty Initiatives and Development, who will bring us through the slide deck. And then we ask that you hold your questions, because we have 7 delegations that would like to speak to the report, and 3 individuals have sent correspondence that have been circulated. So Mr. Radke, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You have to speak up. I can barely hear you. I don't know if others are having the same trouble.
Does that sound better?
No.
No, we can't hear you, Peter.
Okay.
How's this?
No, still not loud.
2 seconds here.
So we'll just take a 5-minute recess until Peter can. We'll just everyone stay put. We'll just hold off for a few minutes and let Peter see if we can get the volume up.
So Mayor, Mr. Radke is going to deliver the presentation from my laptop, which I believe has better sound quality.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. We can hear it very well. There's some musical chairs. All right, so Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we can move to the first slide. Yes, so back in October, staff brought an informational report forward to FEDCO to go over the history of the CARP Airport, as well as some information in terms of how we were moving forward. So some background from that report: the city sold the CARP Airport in 2011 to West Capital Development. Since that disposal, the airport has been operated by a private entity. As part of that disposal, the city entered into a municipal capital facility agreement with West Capital Development. Part of that agreement, the city was able to retain options on specific development lands to incentivize the owner to improve those lands. The deadline to act on those options is coming due in March 11th, 2021, which is why we're before you today. The recommendations contained in this report have no impact to the daily operations of the airport or the airport tenants, and the city is not a party to any agreements between the airport and its tenants. We can go to the next slide. So this is just a location map showing where the airport's located. It's bordered by March Road to the northwest, and to the northeast is CARP Road. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through each of the recommendations. The first recommendation is requesting an extension of the March 11th deadline. West Capital Development, WCD, has agreed to extend the deadline to April 12th so that we have some time to finalize the amended municipal capital facility agreement. They agreed to this extension with the understanding that we were going to get to FEDCO today and to council this month. And so council, we are recommending council approve the extension as well. Next recommendation, or next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Next slide.
Yep, just one moment, Peter.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Having technical difficulties.
Thank you. So recommendation number 2 is to release the purchase options. So we have essentially 2 different types of repurchase options. The first is on the development lands. Those are blocks 293 and 297. The city could opt to repurchase both blocks. The cost would be approximately $592,000 for approximately 271 acres. City staff have acquired 2 appraisals. The land's been appraised at $5 million. Rather than repurchasing the land, staff has negotiated a payment from WCD for the release of these options. A payment of $4.408 million would come from WCD. The $592 that the city would have had to pay to take back the lands is considered owner equity. So we would net out $4.4 million. The way it's structured, WCD would make a down payment of $700,000 upon signing of the agreements, and the balance would be due within 10 years of signing the agreements or registration of remaining lands for development. and there would be a 3% interest rate attached to any outstanding debt up to the 10-year mark. The second option are on the core airport lands. The existing municipal capital facility agreement allows the city to repurchase the core airport lands if WCD defaults on the existing MCFA agreement, or if it's not following the federal regulations for airport operations. And that's regulated by Transport Canada. The amended municipal capital facility agreement does not include that option in that specific form. Federal regulations will continue to govern the operations at the airport. The city will still have an ability to step into the shoes of WCD if it ceases to operate the airport, and I'll get into that in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So block 293 is highlighted in the yellow. So these are one portion of the development lands. These are considered more longer term future development lands, probably 10 to 20 years. We think they could be for a residential use. Next slide, please. And block 297, which is highlighted in the orange, and these lands are zoned as industrial land, and they would be developed ideally with industrial park airside uses in the near future. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 3, we're seeking approval of the amendments to the existing MCF agreement. So overall, the changes that we're proposing for the agreement will provide greater autonomy to WCD to act as any private business owner to allow for growth and development of the core airport lands. The changes reinforce that the airport is privately owned and should have the same tools as any other business to operate. One of the changes that we're proposing is we will be requiring a performance bond from WCD in the amount of $1 million. This bond will be held for 20 years by the city to guarantee airport operation. The $1 million equals approximately 2 years of operations, and the city would have that money available should WCD cease to operate the airport. Beyond the first 20 years, WCD has also agreed to a second 20 years where the city could opt to step into WCD's shoes if they cease to operate the airport, or if they tried to sell the airport, but the purchaser didn't want to operate it as an airport. Again, the city would have the option to step into their shoes at no cost to the city to take over the airport. So in total, with these changes, the city will have the ability to ensure the airport is in operations for the next 40 years. The final highlight to the changes are staff is recommending that we reduce the communal hangar requirements from 1 hangar per 4 residential lots to 1 hangar per 15 residential lots. There is a residential subdivision that's been developed, and the idea was that it was going to be an airside residential neighborhood where people would be able to fly in and keep their planes in the hangars. WCD has shown that there isn't a huge market for this, and so they're asking for this reduced ratio, and city staff is agreeing.
Okay. We'll just get the screen back, Carol. Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And we'll now go to delegations. First is Andrew Wildboar, owner, Carp Airport. So Mr. Wildboar, if you could come onto our screen, and you have 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions from staff. So there we see you, and I think you're unmuted. So the floor is yours, please, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors and staff. My name is Andrew Wildeboer. I am the president of West Capital Developments. I have read the report to FEDCO, and it accurately reflects the terms my partners and I have agreed to. Just a bit of history. My partners and I took the project on 8 years ago from Our predecessor, who was struggling under unsurmountable debt and the project was under duress, there was a fusion of capital needed to the tune of about $4.5 million. And we covered that, and since then have infused another $20 million into the project, and to date have not received a penny out of it. Over the course of time, West Capital Developments has managed the airport, maintained the airport under a burden of liability, keeping up with the protocols, safety management systems in a very tight budget. I feel confident in saying that we did a great job operating this airport so far and honored all of our commitments to date. We also maintain a system of transparency on giving a 5-year budget and having annual advisory meetings with our airport tenants, neighbors, and city staff, and we do quarterly filings to date with the city. There's a discussion about our flight-based operations, FBO, as it comes into this discussion. West Capital Development needs to find a balance in what the airport needs and the space that will work. We are committed in our agreement with the city that before any severance is granted on any of the airport lands, that we would build a more suitable FBO. As with any other business, to ensure its success, it must run efficiently and effectively. And for a business to be sustainable, it must at least have an expectation of profit. The Carp Airport has competitors such as Gatineau, Arnprior, Rockcliffe, and Smith Falls, etc. West Capital Developments has to find a balance between the costs and the services, provide maintenance that allows the airport to run and be competitive to boot. When it comes to maintenance and budgets, the city is all too aware of that roads develop potholes, water drainage is an ongoing concern, grass grows, and snow falls. When it comes to maintenance and budgets, the West Capital has personnel and performs its maintenance ongoing, dealing with priorities, and not all issues are easy to fix. We do provide a fuel service operation during business hours, as well as we supply fuel after hours. Like in any other piece of equipment known to mankind, they can fail, but we do our best to deliver. West Capital is to continue to maintain the highest standards possible with this, and it'll be better set with the terms of the new MCFA agreement. Having said that, the real discussion on the table today is the release of the repurchase options as presented by Peter. The intention of the buyback lands were to ensure the buyer, WCD, would develop the lands, which we are, and by no means was the intention of these buyback provisions to extract money, but to ensure the development and that the developer agreement with the city. Furthermore, West Capital Developments is amenable to a monetary exchange based on what also was presented on the lands that we already thought we owned, based on the fact that we can now run the business as a private enterprise with the ability to get traditional financing and continue to develop land on the property. So the repurchase options are on the table due to the circumstances beyond our control. The property has falls under other jurisdictions such as the DFO, and also has an MDS restriction based on the aggregate resource beside us. The option on the airport itself only comes into play if we're in default, or if we were in default under the MCFDA, which we're not. So the Carp Airport is owned by West Capital Development. It has competition and continues to run its business. I'd be remiss if I didn't commend the efforts of Councillor El-Shantiri and staff for championing the valuable asset in the West End and helping set its course on the right direction. By ensuring its longevity, we are adding capital to the airport. We're providing security to our airport tenants and pilots by extending it to a 40-year lifespan. We're increasing tax revenue to the city, and through this, West Capital is allowed to develop and continue to build homes in the neighborhood. So finally, again, I'd like to thank everybody for their time. And that's my remarks.
Sorry, questions from committee members, Councillor El-Shantiri?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. Mr. Mayor, we're going to hear from other speaker. And I'm not sure, I know traditionally we won't come back to Andrew, but since Andrew maybe be able to answer some of the concern we're going to hear or some of the questions going to hear from the presenter, I would like Andrew to be available at the end of the presentation to answer some of the question committee member they're going to hear, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think given the fact that he's the partner with us, if you can be on standby and just take any notes if there are questions that are raised that are more appropriate to you than our staff, Andrew, we'll come back at the end of all the presentations.
Yeah, very well, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Alpentieri, anything else?
Just a quick question for Andrew. And Andrew, we understand the West Capital Development is in negotiation with their partner, and which is you are the city partner, but you have tenant. They're requesting a longer lease. Will that be a possibility for you to entertain more than one option? Perhaps in a commercial lease, and we have multiple options. You can say 5 years, and then we negotiate. We have 3 options to negotiate. So to make it longer, because some of the pilot claiming they're investing quite a bit in their hangar, and they like to be somewhat stay longer. But of course, that's between you and the tenant. But do you have an objection to a longer lease with option from your part?
I don't have an objection to that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you stand around, Andrew, to the end of the presentation, or maybe we can have some questions for you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Andrew at this point before we go to the next delegate? Okay, Dave McIver. Mr. McIver, the floor is yours. We'll just look for your picture up on the screen here.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. You've got 5 minutes, Mr. McIver. Welcome. Bienvenue.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Watson, councillors, and other FEDCO committee members. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity this morning to speak. I have flown into the Carp Airport since 2013, rented a hangar there from 2016 to 2019, and I've owned a hangar there from 2019 to today. I'm a City of Ottawa resident, have been for 38 years, and for my entire professional career, I've managed small businesses within the City of Ottawa. As some of you are aware, I've been actively pushing to save the Carp Airport, and feel the report in front of you today has some flaws to it. It paints a picture that all is good and that WCD has been doing a stand-up job, and they have been in some areas. I submitted two emails to the FEDCO members over the weekend and included supporting documents to my experience with WCD. I will not retouch on the information outlined in my emails, but ask that you take that information into consideration when making your decision today. The points I would like to touch on are the following. We need a solid plan to ensure the future of the core airport, referencing section 1.3. If WCD wants to develop sections 1.4 and 1.5, it is my opinion that should be accepted, as long as it does not affect the core airport, including runways 0422 and the FBO building. And they will not limit or modify the operations of the core airport in doing so. In the agreement with the above, all hangar owners should receive 40-year land leases with structured fees for the full terms that will eliminate surprises or massive price increases down the road. This ground lease should also protect all hangar owners and guarantee them quiet enjoyment for the full term. Collectively, the group, including hangar owners and business owners, have over $25 million invested in capital at the airport. And these investments need to be protected. When we add the value of the planes and helicopters in the mix, you're talking about a significant amount of assets that are owned by individuals that have an interest in the Carp Airport. They're Ottawa residents, they're taxpayers, they're also voters. I understand we're not the landowners. However, due to what was originally agreed upon between WCD and the City of Ottawa, many of us based our decisions to purchase and invest at the Carp Airport on the long-term plan that was agreed to between WCD and the City of Ottawa, and we expect that they honor the agreement. Transparency and communication should be fluid between WCD and all parties that use the airport. The report mentions that the hangar owners attended the last airport advisory meeting, and that was true. I was present. However, the meeting was more of an information session on what WCD had done in the past year. Hangar owners were not consulted towards future plans for the airport. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time that hangar owners have been presented at the meeting. I know some of the other parties that have businesses on the field have been there, but I have never met a hangar owner yet that have been to one of the prior meetings. My intentions aren't to fight with WCD, but to secure the future of the airport and make sure the original agreement's upheld. It's no different than the Canada Lakes Golf Course or the equestrian park. These are all valuable assets to the city, and we must ensure that they are protected as initially agreed. If we want to just build houses, there are a lot of other places that serviceable lots can be found. Why sacrificing an airport? I don't quite understand that. The hangar owners and businesses that rely on the Carp Airport for their livelihood, we deserve a voice and we deserve to be represented. I would like to thank Councillor El Chantry for meeting with me over the last few months and providing insight into regards of the original agreement. And an agreement I feel that the City of Ottawa must hold.
So you have 1 minute, Mr. McIver.
Sorry, thank you. An agreement that I feel that the City of Ottawa must hold WCD accountable for. I question the movements on 0422, the runway as the report. I personally witnessed more than 12 landings on a single Saturday. I'd like to see proof of the actual report. It says that there was 100 landings on that runway. How is it tracked? Can we actually make sure that is a real number? If the city is going to consider releasing their interest in 1.3, a solid plan to fund the airport needs to be presented. And this should not include cutting up and selling off the core airport, which should actually have other options to make sure that that core is protected. Derek Moody was nice enough to send over a rendering of a potential FBO building, and I believe that was supplied by WCD. But like all the renderings that are on the second floor of the current FBO building, their plans, what's to say that's actually what's going to happen? Because we're in front of you today.
Now, Mr. McIver, your time's up. Can you just wrap up in 10 seconds?
Yep. All I ask is you guys really take a hard look at what's being presented and ensure that there is a future for the core airport.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor El Chantry has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McIver, for your presentation. When you obviously you mentioned about the gravel runway, is that correct? The one you said you had. I mean, isn't that there's transparency? Isn't that Ministry of Transportation or Transport Canada would have that information you're looking for to make sure whatever the number is, if you are in dispute with the number?
No, it's right now, as far as I know, it's being monitored by WCD when they have an employee on shift.
Oh, okay. Also, you mentioned the advisory committee, Dave. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Because the original advisory committee, I think, was, if I remember correctly, it was made up of 5 people. I think 5 individual from the hangar owner or rental. Am I correct? And then with WCD, and I think the city will sit in the meeting as an observer. Is that your understanding? Or maybe Andrew can answer the question about the makeup of the liaison advisory committee. Sorry, the advisory committee.
Thank you, Councillor. The advisory committee is made up of WCD as well as airport tenants, including hangar owners and businesses such as helicopter transport and people that have planes. So we have a matter of 2 people outside of WCD, as well as a neighboring property owner that can influence or be advised of what's happening at the airport as well. And so that's the makeup, and the city staff does sit on these advisories. We've had them every year since inception on an annual basis, and report our last year's, and we present a budget as well as our 5-year plan going forward. Thank you.
And Andrew, Dave, how often that committee meet, Andrew? Once a year or more than once a year?
The committee meets once a year.
Okay, I would follow up after, but Andrew, would you have an objector if a city council sit on that committee? Because I mean, we don't want to get into the weed of private business, but I think as a council, since a lot of the concern comes from the community or from the tenant, end up coming to our office, would that be objection for you to have a council or city council sit on that committee?
I would endorse it, Councilor.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your allowance. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIver. Next speaker is John Nickel, CEO of Corona Aerospace, followed by Peter Jagachandran. I apologize for the mispronunciation. Mr. Nickel, good morning. You've got 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and apologize for the viral nature of the name of my company, but it was named before the current pandemic. So I do want to have a quick chat about the report, and unfortunately there are inaccuracies in the report, and just following up on the comment that Mr. Wildeboer made on the advisory committee, that would tend to indicate that people are actually part of the decision-making process, and that's not the case. The last advisory committee was a 15-minute presentation where there were no there was no representation from the hangars and owners and tenants on their perspectives. Some of the information that was in the report was a surprise to us as we were reading it, including the movements of 0422. And in fact, we can provide a signed affidavit from one pilot alone that had more than 100 landings and takeoffs on that airport in the last 12 months. So that directly, obviously, contradicts what's in that report. In terms of the MCFA allowing the city to repurchase the land, that amendment to repurchase the land if they WCD do not follow federal regulations for airport operations, I believe that amendment needs to be taken out because of safety incidents that have occurred at the airport that have not been reported. We again will have the ability, hopefully after this meeting, to talk to WCD to address those specifically. We had an incident with my aircraft, for example, last winter, where ice and snow came off a hangar and almost took out the people on the ground and the aircraft. And there was a vehicle parked next to the hangar that had over $8,000 worth of damage that was caused by the falling ice and snow. When that incident was reported to airport management, the comment back was, well, you probably shouldn't have parked your car there. So we had to fight with airport management to actually get that written up into the safety management system. So that's one example. Another example is I was refueling an aircraft last year after it had been so-called repaired. I was sprayed with avgas all over my clothes, and I know that incident was also not reported in the safety management system. So we do have concerns about the operation of the airport. We do have safety concerns, and there are other incidents as well that will most likely have to be discussed with Transport Canada. I'm happy to share with Mr. Wildeboer after the meeting so that there are no surprises. But and I'm not necessarily going to talk about that at this committee. However, to be honest, the report does gloss over those. It glosses over the fact that there is not a good relationship between the tenants and operators at the airport and WCD. Now, the report owners, drafters, I'm not sure that you understand that after we were told that 0422 runway was going to be closed, that was the first that we heard of it. And there was a petition raised that raised over 633 signatures against the closure of the runway. That is not in the report. And again, the communication between the airport's tenants and operators is not good, and we need to improve that communication. So I hope that this takes place from this moment on.
1 minute.
Thank you. And that the fact is that there are incidents that give us concern. And my one comment is that I believe that amendment to allow the city to take over operation of the airport should be taken out of that report, and the safety incidents should be taken into account moving forward. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next is Peter Jagakandran. Sorry, I mispronounced your name, Peter. Get Peter up on the screen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, we can't see you yet. But,
thank you for taking my allowing me to speak for 5 minutes. I would like to echo both Dave and Joan's comments, and I would like to add, rather than repeating what is already been mentioned, that in the last 10 years, there seems to be no development of airport at all. It seems to be just babysitting the whole airport as a going concern. So the original purchase agreement that was committed by the developers were to develop the airport and make the airport better. In the last 10 years, there's absolutely zero activities in the context of developing the airport. All this fly-in and all that, all the other activities has been mentioned. There is no time and effort has been put into it. It seems to be just a lip service to say, oh, there's no demand for it. The demand is there if you have the willingness to go and market as such. I find it hard to believe there is no market for these. Obviously, the developer has a different motives than just developing the airport, and I can see that. And in my opinion, there has been zero commitments from developing the airport. So I just wanted to make sure that is being heard. The other comment is that has been mentioned is that the good stewardships, and I don't know where that's coming from. You talk to the pilots and the users of the airport, they're at the different opinion. Just because they're keeping it silent or not reporting to Transport Canada, it doesn't mean everything is it's 100% is not. I have been the user for the last 2 years. I have used the gravel runway 15 times in 2020. We are also in post or pre-COVID situation. So we shouldn't take 2020 as a proper statistics to make a judgment on this. We should be looking at 100 movement is seriously under reported. And I would like to know how the audit has been done to verify whether that's accurate. I can tell you I have used it 15 times in 2020. That's 15% of what is reported. And I can tell you my instructor has used it many, many times. And he was shocked when I talked to him about 100 use. The other important part is the $1 million bond is, in my opinion, is an insignificant amount of money. It should be held longer than that, probably in the tune of a $5 million bond. And also, why is the city allowing taxpayers' money to be used for financing a developer or giving them a finance credit of 3%? I would like to take that if I was given an option. Are the city of also considering other options? For example, can we buy it from you and run the airport for our kids? Take them off from these social medias and all these activities that I have 4 kids and I wanted to pass it on to my kids and take them off from all these issues they're going against. And I want them to get out to the airport and start looking at it as an option. And I don't want the airport shut down. And I pay a lot of tax. You go and check my name, and I pay over $150,000 in property tax alone here in Ottawa. I am a local guy. and it should be held local and for a longer than 40 year. Where is this 40 years coming from?
Minute, please. 1 minute.
Why can't we consider long-term? If there is a commitment to keep the airport, it should be longer than 40 years. And we as a hangar owner, I own 2 hangars there, I should be given an option for longer than 40 years, 20 year with 4 other options should be considered. That proves that the developer has. Don't get me wrong, I want the developer to succeed. I want the rest of the land to be, used whatever he chooses to. But for the airport, we as a hangar owner, like Dave and others said, we put a lot of money into this. We need a protection, and that was the original requirement for selling the airport in the first place. And if you are taking away those agreements,
you can wrap up, please, Peter.
Yeah. All other proposals that they were not given, if you're just amending these agreements, we are basically giving away the land at $16,000 per acre. That's seriously undervalued, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Peter. I see no hands up, so we'll go to our next Pat Fagnano, Manager, Carp Airport. Pat, if you could, we'll let you in now, and you have 5 minutes. There's Pat. We're just having a little difficulty letting you in, Pat, so just give us a moment.
Pat, are you able to unmute?
How's that?
Oh, there we go. We can hear you. You
Okay.
have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay, good morning again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and committee members, for this opportunity to discuss operational issues at the Carp Airport. Briefly, I have worked in the aviation industry for over 33 years with the Toronto Port Authority at the Billy Bishop City Airport. As an Ottawa native originally.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Okay, we lost you for a minute there. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, it was my desire to return to Ottawa, being originally from Ottawa, and I had the fortunate opportunity to be hired by West Capital Development as airport manager at the Carp Airport. My decision to work for West Capital and under the leadership of Andrew Wildeborough was based on the acknowledgement, which I'm still convinced, West Capital is firmly dedicated to the committed and successful and long-term operation of the Carp Airport. I want to take this opportunity to address the issue of closing runway 0422. Runway 0422 is 2,205 feet long and 65 feet wide. It is unprepared gravel surface. This runway is limited to small single-engine aircraft types that can utilize a short runway. The unpaved gravel surface is subject to frost even during the winter months, and in spring, the gravel pavement requires ongoing grading and maintenance. However, due to the age condition of the runway, there are structural defects and surface drainage is poor. The loss of granular materials they needed to resurface and correct the structural deficiencies would result in a costly re-engineered runway design and construction project. Runway 0422 is only operational typically between mid-May and early November. The runway is not lighted and is only operational during daylight hours. West Capital Airport staff have always monitored aircraft the UNCOM system. However, movements were not recorded until March of 2020. We began on March 23rd, 2020, recording aircraft movements on all of our runways. On March 23rd to December 31st of last year, the airport staff recorded a total of 10,169 movements on all runways. The number of aircraft movements, a landing, a takeoff, or touch and go on runway 0422 was what we recorded was 100 movements even, which represents less than 1% of all runway movements. The predominant traffic has always been on runway 1028. Most operations outside 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. occur on this runway, since this runway is lighted and utilized for nighttime aircraft operations. It has been suggested that closing runway 0422 would create a safety issue by not having a crosswind runway available. Personally, I don't agree with this view, as it's a pilot's decision to land or take off in the crosswind conditions in excess of the aircraft performance certification and beyond the pilot's abilities. It certainly may be an inconvenience to divert to another airport to do a crosswind component. This is not a safety related issue. The other concern expressed is that runway 1028, if 1028 becomes unserviceable due to an aircraft breakdown on the runway, then runway 0422 could be used as the alternate. That is only accurate if the aircraft is small, single-engine aircraft capable of operating on a gravel runway, and only during daytime hours. In the event of an aircraft breakdown on our main runway, the airport does have in place a disabled aircraft removal plan to effectively and efficiently remove a damaged aircraft from the runway. With these considerations in mind, among others, West Capital are working with an airport planning design firm to determine the best use for airport lands and to develop a strategic airport master plan. West Capital is also considering investments into maintenance and upkeep of the airport, including airside, landside, and hangar areas. In an effort to improve operational capacity for 1028, West Capital is considering investing in a parallel taxiway and airport connections to enhance safety and separation of aircraft movements at the Carp Airport.
1 minute.
Okay. To resolve many of these issues is, sorry, I got ahead of myself. For the prevailing winds, runway 28 is most often used. Currently, if runway 28 is in use, an aircraft must taxi onto Alpha Taxiway, backtrack onto the runway to take off. If there are other aircraft flying in the circuit, they will be required to wait until the aircraft backtracking is either off the runway or until it takes off. This restricts the amount of takeoffs and landings that can occur in peak or busy hours and leads to delays for other arriving and departing aircraft in the circuit. To resolve these issues, consideration is being given to developing an airport land use plan, which would incorporate a taxiway parallel to runway 1028. This will reduce the need for
10 seconds.
This will reduce the need for backtracking to the run threshold, increase runway capacity for peak hours, and minimize delays to other aircraft. To illustrate a commitment to the airport in 2020, West Capital made several significant and
Pat, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Unfortunately, you're over time. But thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next is Mark Briggs, owner, Carp Airport, Eastern Long Hangar, Bay 3 and 1/2 Bay 5. So, Mr. Briggs, just bring you into the meeting room here. There you are, and the floor is yours for 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning when you're at.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, other interested parties. I'm Mark Briggs, and as our good mayor has pointed out, I'm a hangar owner at the Carp Airport. I've been involved in aviation for 40 years. I have been an Ottawa taxpayer since 1989, and I have been a hangar owner at the Carp Airport since 2006. That means in my tenure at Carp, I've lived through multiple airport owners. I would like to bring to the attention of council that throughout previous discussions, the group of people who happen to hang out at the airport have been referred to as tenants. And I would like to focus council's attention on the fact that with respect to discussions between airport occupants and the City of Ottawa, we are hangar owners. We are the people who have put in, as has been mentioned previously, between $25 and $30 million of our own capital to build infrastructure. That infrastructure forms a significant portion of the tax base for this airport. And as such, we need to have a voice at this table. This should not be a bipartite, but should be a tripartite conversation. Should have been from the outset and has not been, which is truly a shame. That having been said, I'd like to point out, as others have, that the report that has been presented today contains significant shortcomings and frankly has been very heavily slanted toward a particular viewpoint. And that viewpoint is of course the viewpoint of the developer. I know that we have Andrew on board here today, and I'm glad to see him here to perhaps answer some of these questions.
Mark, can you speak up a little bit? It's a little hard to hear.
Thank you. The silly fan on my computer just came on and drowned me out. Moving forward, we need to ensure that the airport has long-term viability. We've talked about 40-year leases. We've talked about a 20-year performance bond. We need to actually ensure that 20 years for anyone who has a significant financial commitment already sunk in the ground at this airport we need to make sure that that 20-year amortization period is not viable. We need to actually move that out to a considerably longer period. I would like to suggest to councillors that we consider a minimum of 40-year leases, and that those leases actually be negotiated prior to the city releasing its interest in the airport. As taxpayers, we have relied upon the city to actually protect our interests. If the city backs away, as has been recommended to this committee, it will leave all of us as hangar owners hanging out in the breeze. And that is an extremely uncomfortable position, and will cause significant devaluation of our real property. I'd also like to point out that there have been several incidents at the airport which really bring into the great focus the fact that the airport management, the airport owner, has been as hands-off as possible, as do little as possible through its entire tenure. And we have within the airport something that's called a safety management system. It's a requirement for the airport to have in place. It's essentially a measure of the quality of how the airport is operated, and it is a means to ensure that the airport remains operating safely. The safety management system at CARP Airport is frankly a lip service. We have had incidents, including a runway incursion, which has been documented by video. It has been presented to the airport manager. The airport manager said, no, that's not a runway incursion. It is not going to be reported. It has to be reported to Transport Canada by federal law, and it has not been. This is only one incident. There have been several. When we also look at the safety management system, one of the requirements is that there be an airport safety committee that meets at a minimum on an annual basis. That meeting, to the best of our knowledge, has not taken place in the last 3 years. I have this on good word from a member who has been a part of the committee and who has received no notification of any ongoing airport safety committee meetings, again in violation of the safety management system. So the picture that has been painted in the report is a rosy picture, and at this point I believe that we need our councillors to know that that picture is inaccurate at best. We also have basic operational challenges.
Mr. Briggs, unfortunately your time's up. We have a question from Councillor El-Shantiri for you.
Go ahead.
Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Briggs, for your presentation. I heard it for the second time today. There is almost 25 million or so, the number been used, invested in those hangars. Are we talking about inside the hangar or the outside the hangar? Like where the 25 million? I'm just trying to understand where's that number from.
Thank you for your question, Mr. El-Shantiri. Let us be very clear. The hangar owners own the buildings. They are not owned by the airport. They have been constructed by and are owned by the hangar owners. So that $25 million to $30 million number is based on our investment in that infrastructure. We actually own those buildings, everything on the outside and everything on the inside. They are on land which is leased from the airport owner.
Okay. And my other question, Mr. Briggs, and it concerned me because I'm, as the local councillor in my community live there and I live there, when we say it's some unsafety practice or incident, but you as an individual, whether pilot or resident or tenant, you can report that directly to Transport Canada, can't you?
We can. The primary level of reporting is to the airport management, where it should be documented as an SMS report. And then there's another layer that comes above that, which is called a CADORS report, which is the report through Transport Canada. That activity is not happening.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Briggs, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Perry Kelly. We'll ask Mr. Kelly to come into the Zoom chat.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, you probably don't want to see me. I'm in my pajamas.
Lucky you.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Mayor Watson, the council members and the FEDCO committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I want to start by saying, most importantly, I'm a taxpayer of Ottawa. I've been in paying taxes and have a home and other investments in Ottawa for over 40 years. I love the city. I believe it's extremely well run. I'm proud to be living in Ottawa and call that my home. I'm from Northern Ontario, but I call Ottawa my home. I'm very happy with how council and our municipal government runs our city. I couldn't be more proud. I have also been flying out of the CARP airport since the early to mid 90s and have investment in the airport along with a lot of the other, some of the people who spoke today. I support Dave McIver's comments, Mark Briggs, all these comments from the hangar owners 100%. I have only one request, and I do echo all the other things they've said, but I have one request, and it's very simple. There is conservatively over $30 million of infrastructure investment, not counting airplanes. I'm talking hangars, buildings, supporting structures in that airport that individuals, business owners have invested and put into that airport. And those have created jobs. They continue to create jobs. They fuel our economy. They fuel the area. We did that understanding the agreement that the city had with West Capital Development and made those investment decisions based on that. So West Capital should have to live up to their agreement, not change the agreement, live up to the terms of that agreement. And I'm just simply asking the city to ensure that that agreement is intact, not changed, and they live up to it. They knew what they were signing. They got a sweetheart deal with all the land around the airport. They're developing that land. To suggest that they're not going to or not making money, I question that. I mean, West Capital is a land developer. They know how to make money, and I applaud them at that. They should, but don't touch the core airport. We made an investment in that airport. We expect it to be protected and expect West Capital to live up to the agreement. Or we would not have made that investment. I would not have made that investment, neither would the other people. So please, Mr. Mayor and council members and FEDCO, we simply want them to live up to that agreement. That's all, nothing more. You know, to suggest there's transparency, like I said, I've been flying since the 90s out of CARP. Have had a hangar for the last 7-8 years, something like that. I've received one email being invited to an informational meeting. There's no transparency. Many of my hangar colleagues and partners have asked for transparency. We don't get it. To suggest that is absolutely false. To suggest there's a group that represents the owners on the airport, I've never seen any transparency. I've never been invited to a meeting like that. I've never seen minutes of meetings from that. It simply doesn't exist. And it's very frustrating to have to listen to a report that doesn't have all the facts, that doesn't consider a $30 million investment made by hangar owners and business owners that I think is significant and should be considered. And I'm asking the city to consider that and not let West Capital walk away or change this agreement. We simply want the agreement, and there's no detriment to the city to have them live up to that agreement. The detriment is to the people who built that airport and continue to create jobs, create business, and grow our city, our beautiful city. And I'm asking council to please consider that. Consider us who've been left out of the report. We're not being considered in that report, and we want to be considered. So to summarize, I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing us to be heard. I again believe you run an amazing city, and I hope you'll do the right thing. And the right thing to do is to keep that agreement intact and ensure that the airports run properly. That's all, nothing else.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's the end of our delegations. Councillor El Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I had asked Andrew to stick around to respond some of the
Probably out
concerns.
of the room now, Carol.
Okay. So, Andrew, I asked you earlier about the advisory committee. I'd like you to refresh our mind because I think there's only 2 or 3 councillors still from the original agreement when we initiate the advisory committee. So I believe our staff do attend as observer, but I think the committee made up, as you said earlier, of 2 members from West Capitol and 3 from the owner and some from the neighbor, I believe. Is that correct? Like, what's the total number about the advisory committee?
So, Councillor, that's to who? To staff?
To Andrew. No, to Andrew, Mr. Mayor, because there's a couple of questions I think Andrew needs to respond to, not our staff.
Okay, Andrew.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillor. So we have an advisory committee. The advisory committee was set up in the former when the former MCFDA was, or the existing MCFDA was drafted and put in place, and the representation has to be from a neighbor, from the landowner, West Capitol Developments, city staff, and at least, and I have to be at least two airport representatives, whether they're business owners, so helicopter transport has been on the advisory committee. I fail to remember the name. Up till last year, there was a couple 2 other hangar owners that were a member of the advisory committee. They retired, so we opened it up this year and invited more people to attend because of one person was no longer able to sit as an on the airport advisory committee. And the committee, their job is to, give advice, which is they've had the opportunity to do. In fact, the most recent airport advisory committee meeting, we're commended on the work that we were able to perform in the past year, and as well as we were able to keep the fee, because we charge an airport maintenance fee. We're actually, due to the fact that we're developing properties around the perimeter of the airport, where more contribution is going on an annual basis to the airport itself and the reserve fund. Everybody that owns either a commercial property or a residential property contributes to the airport. So therefore, they get advice to sit on the committee. So they have representation there. So we're commended. Yes, and there's things that perhaps of safety management concern that I've heard. We have an SMS protocol. It is regulated by Transport Canada. They do audit our safety management system on a biannual basis. We have to perform an individual audit on our safety management system on an annual basis so that we are maintain an airport that is safety. And some of the incidents I am certainly not familiar with if that was the case.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Also, I asked you earlier, we heard leasing should be longer than 20 years. And that's obviously between you and your tenant. I don't think the city is party how long you can initiate lease, but you said earlier you were open to the idea, negotiate more options. So basically, if you sign up with the tenant for 10 years, you might give them 10 or 20 years to be negotiated under new condition and new price. You said you're open to that discussion as well, because the reason I'm asking you this, because the mayor and myself earlier we made it clear as a city, as a local councillor, we want that airport to stay operation in CARP. That clearly our position. Yes, the city is not involved in the operation, but the cities intend to keep that airport in our West End community for economic development, for other purposes. So I will be asking staff, Mr. Mayor, to amend the advisory committee to include the local council or another council from the surrounding if the local council choose one day doesn't want to sit on that advisory committee, to allow another councillor, and I would suggest will be a neighboring councillor to the Carp Airport. And I hope staff will amend that portion of the advisory committee. And I heard from Andrew earlier, he's in support of that. And also it'll give us an opportunity to meet and hear from our resident who represented on the committee, and also from the tenant and other, if they have any concern we can bring to the city. That's all my question for now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Andrew, for providing some clarity in some of the comments.
Great, thank you very much. So now on questions to staff, Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One simple question. We heard through the delegations several references to the number of takeoffs and landings last year at the airport. I just would like to know who verifies that, or who can settle whether the right number is before us or not.
Mr. Mayor, I would probably defer that question to Andrew. The data we received was from the airport.
Andrew?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that question. We track during our operational hours, which are 8 o'clock till I believe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We track all movements on the airport. So if is there a possibility there was more landings on and off 04/2022 after hours? Not likely, but on the weekends, very possible, which would not be recorded, but neither would the movements be on the other main runway 1028. So the movements are recorded on during operational hours. So we have a good sample size of actually the difference between how many use the 04/22 and 1028.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? No. Okay. Councillor Alfantiri. Oh, sorry, Councillor Suds.
Councillor Suds, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify one thing, and that is a question for staff, likely Derek, of why the city didn't entertain other bids for the airport through this process.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. This is a question that's come up in the correspondence a number of times since we were first before FEDCO in the fall. With respect to the airport, the city's not the owner and has not been the owner of this airport since 2011. We're not dealing with a sale of the property. I'm sure in 2011, when this property was sold, the city would have been more than happy to accept additional bids at that point in time. However, going forward and where we are currently, we were faced with the question to exercise options or come up with an agreement or let the options lapse. And those are our three potentially viable options. The staff recommendation before you today is to move forward with a negotiated agreement with respect to the future development lands. With respect to the airport itself, there is nothing that has been occurred that would trigger the city having the option to repurchase the airport. So the options that are before us with respect to, potentially accepting other bids, in my own opinion, I think it would be in bad faith for us to move forward, exercise those options, and then start negotiating with another party. However, with respect to the actual airport lands themselves, those options have not been triggered at this point in time. Within the municipal capital facility agreement, there are specifications that speak to when those options will get triggered. There's an entire cure. They have to be in default. They have to have gone through a whole cure process to be able to give them an opportunity to remedy the situation. And the types of operational or maintenance concerns that were raised today, simply, in my opinion, would never trigger the city actually taking back ownership of the airport lands.
Okay, thank you. And then just to clarify as well, that there will continue to still be a municipal capital facilities agreement in place, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Councillor El Shantir, you have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but before I introduce my motion, I just want to ask Andrew, is there something, Andrew, you need to clarify before because we heard from, or you heard also from the presentation, is there something you feel need to be clarified before I move on?
No, thank you, Councillor. I believe that the report that FEDCO has presented is an accurate reflection. I believe the comments of Mr. Moody do summarize the position of the MCFDA and that its continuance is going to be ongoing. And again, I support the fact and actually endorse the fact that if a councillor such as yourself, Councillor El Shantir, would be welcome to help and be on the advisory for our airport so we can continue on, live this 40 years and beyond, and add the capital that we have agreed to with the city to back into the airport, giving the infrastructure required and allowing us to make this a viable project ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, very much. Mr. Mayor, item number 9 in the report, it reads an amendment to require WCD or subsequently owner to maintain a performance bond in the amount of $1 million. I would like that to represent in proximity 2 years of operating costs for the airport to demonstrate insurance of commitment to the operation of the airport for the next 20 years. I'd like, Mr. Mayor, to change that 1 million to perhaps at least 2 or 3 million. And I'd like to hear from staff. You know, you're talking about $1 million in today's dollar, but maybe in 10 years or 20 years from now, that 1 million will not be sufficient. Is there's a concern to raise that amount from 1 million perhaps to 2 or 3 to make sure we cover the cost of operation for at least 2 years? Maybe Mr. Moody.
Yeah. With respect to the number that's presented in the report, I think it's important that we, you know, the number that we came to was as a result of a negotiation around a variety of different aspects and options. And, you know, while city staff have no concern with that number being greater, we can't speak on behalf of West Capital Development. And, you know, I guess I would only point out that the number that was arrived in the report was arrived at in, you know, in discussion about a number of different things, and it wasn't solely around that, but it does represent 2 years operating costs. And with respect to it being increased, staff don't have a concern with that. But again, it's the only concern would be is it's something that in the bigger picture that, you know, consensus can be achieved.
And Mr. Mayor, if with your permission, I'd like to ask Andrew if it's okay with him to increase that number to $2 million. Would that be something you can live with, Andrew?
Thank you through your, Mr. Mayor. It was, as presented by Mr. Moody, an ongoing discussion of 18 months to come up and with different things going back and forth in order to find some sort of consensus, which I think we did. The reason why we from our side settled at 1 million is number one, the revenue is still being generated by the airport through the airport maintenance charge and the land leases. So the city actually, if they had to start running the airport without us, they still would not, that wouldn't negate the tenants that we have or the hangar owners, their responsibility to continue to contribute to the airport. So adding 2 years we thought would be sufficient because the city would not be in any vulnerable state if there was ever a default and we were unable to cure the default.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew. And Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if, I know that this is negotiated for quite some time, and I really appreciate the staff's work on this file. But there's nowhere, because I know the city is not looking to go back and operate an airport as much as we don't want to operate a golf course or other. Is there's a way we can add to the recommendation 9 or item 9, you know, if something happened to the, so to allow the hangar or the airport tenant to negotiate directly with the city if this is something to happen, if there's a need for this to be added to the report. Because we heard from the owners, they'll be willing to take over the operation of the airport itself if something to happen. Is there's a need to add it on, or that's going to be open for discussion at the time that happens?
Mr. Mayor, with respect to if we ended up in a default situation and the city chose to step in and operate the airport, it's city staff's understanding that we would be able to assign that opportunity to operate to another party, and provided the airport was continued in operation. At that point in time, we would seek potential partners. It would not necessarily be the pilots, but a group that is familiar with aviation could respond to any potential requests for proposals at that point in time.
I think, Mr. Moody, just to get us moving on this, I think, Councillor, the clerk's office has suggested that perhaps you work with them on the wording, either of the amount and your participation on the advisory board, so that you can present that at the council meeting, and that if those members of committee are comfortable voting on the staff report, knowing that you will be bringing forward potentially 1 or 2 amendments at council. Does that sound fair, Councillor?
That sounds more than fair, but if you allow me just 1 minute, Mr. Mayor, to say thank you to our staff, because and also for Andrew and his team and the pilot and everyone who've been in touch with us. Actually, we've been quite sometimes. I visit the airport myself. I talked to Andrew. I saw the operation myself. This is something I take pride in. Call Carp Airport in our community or in the west part of the city. And I made it clear to WCD from day one, we are interested to keep that airport in operation in our community. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will be bringing, I would like to increase the amount for item number 9, so Andrew's not surprised. And also I would like to amend the advisory committee to include the local councillor or another councillor if the local councillor choose not to sit on the committee. I will do that, but I want to say thank you to Derek Moody and Peter and Stephen O'Brien. We worked together on this report, and it was many back and forth. I just want to say thank you to all of you for support. If this is very valuable asset to us in the city of Ottawa, and we like to maintain it. And I want to thank Andrew for sticking around during the meeting to answer some of the concern my colleague have. With that, Mr. Mayor, I would ask for your support on, and I will bring a couple of items to council meeting on February 10th. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So on the recommendations as before us, carried?
Carried.
Councillor Kavanaugh, if you're still there, I've had a word from Mr. Willis that in fact what you were looking for is actually being undertaken now, a review of the program that's coming back in the fall. So your direction is not required because it's already in the work plan. So I think Mr. Willis can confirm that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the councillor and I had talked about a month ago about the alignment between the brownfield policy and the official plan's effort to promote intensification at TOD sites, and we agreed that we're doing our brownfield policy review. The application before you today is completely compliant with the policy as it stands today. We are doing a review of the program, and the councillor gave me some of her thoughts, and we've agreed to look at those in the policy review.
Okay, that's great then.
May I speak?
Yep, go ahead, councillor.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate Mr. Willis working with me and Mr. Herware as well. This is because we were looking at the brownfield application that was in my ward was near transit, and therefore had a longer period of time to repay back the grant for a brownfield, yet it is not related to transit. So they applied under the rules that are currently there, and that that makes sense and it's been accepted. But going forward, we have to look at promoting so that the rules are looking at what kind of development we are giving emphasis on near transit. And I think we can do better in terms of having more residential and so giving incentive for that kind of development rather than drive-in storage units, so that we can do much better. We've got Lincoln Field is very close to here, and we do need more residential buildings near transit, and there will be brownfields, and we would like those brownfields to be used. So let's incentivize the development that we want in our official plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for stick handling that suggestion, Councillor Kavanaugh. Next is motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion ayant fait l'objet d'un avis précédent. Vice Chair Dudas has a motion with respect to economic recovery efforts, and we have 2 delegates that would like to speak to it. So Vice Chair Dudas, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last meeting, I did read the entire motion, so maybe I'll just go to the therefore it be resolved to refresh everyone's memories. But therefore it be resolved that as a part of the city's COVID-19 economic recovery efforts, the Chief Procurement Officer identify opportunities to include and encourage the city's use of social procurement projects and social enterprise in city procurement, in close collaboration with City Economic Development staff, staff from the Community and Social Services Department, city staff on the Human Needs Task Force, Invest Ottawa, as well as community stakeholders such as the United Way East Ontario and Community Foundation, Buy Social Canada, and others as appropriate, with the intent of ensuring citizen-led economic efforts, local social procurement capacity building, and job creation initiatives are included in the city's overall recovery strategy. And be it further resolved that the Chief Procurement Officer report back to the Finance and Economic Development Committee no later than the end of Q3 2021 with the actions taken to enhance social sustainability in city procurement and recommendations to incorporate social enterprises in future city procurement for committee and council's consideration. And be it further resolved that social procurement opportunities be considered as part of projects initiated by other levels of government where appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. So we have, do you want to speak to it now, or do you want us to listen to the 2 delegates first?
I can quickly just speak to it. That you know, I've worked very closely with city staff in coming to this motion and having the resolutions before us, and you know, it's something that I know that staff were very eager to undertake. They have undertaken some efforts initially to get to this point, and this will just once again push it a little bit further. And you know, as we look to recover from the pandemic, I want to make sure that we're looking at all levels, whether it's, you know, at the grassroots level and making sure that that the economy is recovering at every aspect. And you know, I've had a lot of wonderful feedback from members and community stakeholders in respect to this motion and just what the city can do to help be a leader in this field. So once again, I look for everyone's support on this, and this is an action that we'll get further information from staff about at the end of this year's. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we have Martin Adeller, LeBreton Flats Community Benefits Coalition. If Martin is ready to go. There, I see you, Martin. You want to say hello to make sure we hear you? Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, can't hear you. Just a second. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. So we're just waiting to see how we can get your mic working. So Martin, can you hear me? Okay, Mr. Adler, we're having a little bit of difficulty. So Carol from our clerk's office is going to email you to see if we can get that fixed. In the interim, we'll get the second speaker to speak, Michael Murr, Executive Director, Center for Social Enterprise Development. Michael, are you there? There, I see you there. Can we hear you say hello, Michael?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee.
Okay, so why don't we go with you, and we're going to try to help out Martin while you have your 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of committee. My name is Michael Murr. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Social Enterprise Development. My pleasure to be here this morning and to speak in support of Councillor Duda's motion. CSED is a nonprofit. We were founded in 2013, and we're located in Bayview Yards. So we very much see ourselves as part of the broader continuum of business services that are available in the city. We work with charities, nonprofits, and social entrepreneurs to help them develop, launch, and grow social enterprises. We also work with purchasers who are looking to build social procurement into their own supply chains. Our services include training and skills development, coaching and consulting, and networking and procurement activities. So you may have heard of our annual conference last week. We had 90 people join us, including Will McDonald, and very pleased to say we had a really energetic conversation around the theme of emerging stronger, so strategies to come out of COVID. So a social enterprise then sells a good or service in the marketplace like any other business, but it prioritizes their social impact over profit. So it prioritizes that social impact, and it reinvests the majority of their earnings back into their social mission. And why do they do that? Well, organizations, charities, and nonprofits, they do that so that they can generate additional income for their organization. If they're in the training and employment space, if they can help their beneficiaries that have struggled with entering the mainstream workforce, they can assist those disadvantaged groups, and they can advance their own mission. So in Ottawa, if we look at Ottawa, about 125 social enterprises, so a wide range of business activities, everything from food and beverage, if we think of Gourmet Express, social enterprise of the Vanier Community Service Center, Wabano Fine Chocolates. If we think of Hot Shoe Productions, so that offers photography and videography services, recycling services that are provided by Operation Come Home's Bottle Works, and accounting services, believe it or not. So we have Intact Accounting, which is a social enterprise of the Ottawa Chinese Community Services Center. So a very, very wide range. And why do organizations purchase from social enterprises? I think they do that because, and I should say, why purchase from a social enterprise? And I think it's every purchase has a ripple effect, whether you intend it or not. And if you purchase from a social enterprise, you're then able to unlock additional community wealth. So beyond the factors of price and quality, beyond environmental considerations, to include social impact and social purpose. So it supports the city's, I believe it supports the city's objectives of building back better and creating that long-term community wealth. I think it's important, I do recognize that social enterprises are not, I think, ever going to be able to provide the full range of required services. So although, yes, social enterprises can provide some types of services, in many other cases, they're going to be strong tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers working with those tier 1 suppliers that are supplying the city directly. So CSED, in our nonprofit role, we continue to work with nonprofits and charities. A couple of years ago, we helped to develop Dallo Property Services. So this is a social enterprise of the Somali Center for Family Services. They worked in partnership with Ottawa Community Housing with funding from the Ottawa Community Foundation to develop a new social enterprise in the area of litter pickup and flyer delivery. They've been so successful that they have since grown to offer more broadly property management services. And more recently, I've helped a nonprofit to develop a new commercial cleaning service. We'll start to see that in the community shortly. A third example is with the University of Ottawa and their Open Center for Cognitive Abilities. So it's to create a social enterprise that becomes a one-stop shop for employers and organizations that want to improve accessibility features within their own organizations. Secondly, CSED continues to support. Thank you. CSED continues to support social purchasing. So part of the conversation with the project team at the Ottawa Public Library, Library and Archives Canada, helping them to understand the social enterprise perspective and potential fit as it relates to food and beverage services within that new facility. And also working with your procurement services group to help them understand the landscape, the local social enterprise landscape, and thirdly, with the broader LeBreton Flats Community Benefits Coalition. So in closing, I very much support the motion and the direction. The city is an absolutely key anchor institution. It has a leadership position. It is seen by others, and also will have a huge influential effect in the community when other purchasers look at the city and its actions. So I would encourage you to continue along this path. Take advantage of the interest of community groups like CSED, United Way East Ontario, the Community Foundation, Buy Social Canada, so a wide number of organizations, thank you, that are ready, willing, and able to assist. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Dudas, please.
Michael, I just wanted to thank you very much for being here today. And I wanted to ask, you represent and have a number of members from the social enterprise economy. How has the pandemic impacted them and their ability to offer services or to provide their enterprise expertise?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say it overall has been very negative. That being said, there have been some areas where, in fact, if I was talking to Wabano Fine Chocolates the other day, and I think because we're all sitting at home, maybe a bit more hungry, their business has actually gone through the roof. Overall, though, it's been very negative, and with areas, if we use catering as an example. So catering, coffee shops, these have been sort of traditional areas where social enterprises have started up. And obviously those two in particular have been hit extremely hard. So what it's meant is that organizations have really had to adjust their thinking. Many have tried to accelerate their plans in terms of moving online, in terms of an online sales channel. Others have closed. So if we think of Eat More Soup, which was a social enterprise that had made soup. It was selling their homemade soup through Farm Boy and other stores. They just could not see a way forward, and they've closed. So it's been very difficult.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So we'll try Martin now. See if Martin is able to join us. Martin Adler, who is LeBreton Flats Community Benefits Coalition. Martin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can't see you, but we can hear you. So go ahead.
The host has stopped my video according to the message.
I think we better not take a risk of trying to put on the video. We can hear you, which is the important part.
Well, that's okay. Thank you for letting me speak today to the committee. I'm a member of the steering committee of the LeBreton Flats Community Benefits Coalition, and I'm speaking today on the coalition's behalf. The coalition was formed in June 2019 with the goal to achieve a community benefits approach for the redevelopment of LeBreton Flats. Currently, the coalition comprises 30 formal members and ally organizations, including the Center for Social Enterprise Development, Causeway Work Center, Childcare Now in Ottawa, Ottawa District Labor Council, 4 community associations, Somerset West Community Health Center, the Ottawa Aboriginal Coalition, and United Way Ontario East. Our members share a vision of LeBreton as an equitable community where all walks of life can live and work, and that a CBA approach, community benefits agreement approach, is the most accountable way to achieve such outcomes. In this context, the coalition fully supports this motion and the concept of citizen-led economic efforts, local social procurement capacity building, and job creation initiatives to be included in the city's overall recovery strategy. Ontario Construction Secretariat estimates that in Ontario alone, approximately $43 billion of construction projects at different stages in the pipeline contain some community benefit elements. Many existing community benefits already contain social procurement provisions that are generating social multipliers for every construction dollar spent. Here in Ottawa, our coalition's collaborating with the NCC, the Joint Facilities Project team, and city staff to advance social procurement opportunities through a community benefits lens. Approval of this motion, this important motion, is an important step forward to focused and adequate resources to convene and connect all relevant stakeholders, mobilize solutions, and track and evaluate progress. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for Martin? No, thank you very much. So we have before us a motion by our Vice Chair, Councillor Dudas. All those in, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Leeper, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I do have a question for staff. The motion is obviously seeking to encourage social procurement in our procurement processes. In terms of reporting back, is it viable to let us know as a percentage of our procurements how many have included social procurement in them?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we can include that in the report that we'll bring forward in Q3 as a result of this motion.
Just roughly speaking, how many procurements does the city do each year?
So on an annual basis, we award over $1 billion in contracts, usually with around 1,200 to 1,300 individual vendors. I'm not sure how many specific solicitations that is, but I can provide that information.
Okay, and then so obviously I'm interested in knowing as a percentage of those, how many will include some social aspect on a go forward basis. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So on the motion as presented by Councillor Dudas, carried.
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 Thank you.
Carried.
Carried.
Notice is a motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Avis de motion pour examen lors de réunion subséquente. Other business. Just on the, other business or inquiries. We have any written inquiries, Madam Clerk? No. So the special joint meeting of FEDCO and the nominating committee will convene immediately following this meeting. For members of council, you will need to log off this meeting and log into the special joint FEDCO nominating committee Zoom meeting, and the clerk's office has resent you the Zoom details for ease of reference. So we'll adjourn now and meet in about 5 minutes. Motion to adjourn, carried. Adopté?
Carried.
All right, we'll see you in 5 minutes on the other channel.